Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Josh's Car Corner. This is an idea I got after watching Jay Leno's Garage. You may have seen it on the internet. Jay Leno, host of The Tonight Show, has a couple hundred cars, and one of the things he does is he has a website where he goes over all the cars in his garage and reviews them. And then other people will bring cars in for him to review as well, and he puts it all up on a website. So I got this idea from seeing that. My garage isn't quite as big as Jay's, very nearly, it's close, and I don't have quite as many cars as he does, I only have two, but I thought it'd be a good thing to try anyway, just to see how y'all liked it. Obviously, if you are a fan of cars in any way, you should go check out Jay's site too, especially rare and unique cars. He has some wonderful cars, and I recommend you check his site out too. This is my 2006 Pontiac GTO. I got it 6 months ago. Fantastic car, absolutely love it. It's the second to last performance car that Pontiac ever built. The last one being obviously the G8. We actually kind of got this car by happy coincidence thanks to somebody who's no longer with General Motors, one of the great car guys, Bob Lutz. Back in 2002, when the Chevy Camaro died, the Pontiac Firebird died as well. They were built on the same platform, the F-body. So Pontiac had suddenly become a division that had no true performance car. They had Grand Prix and Grand Ams, but these were all front-wheel drive, and ironically they were all built on pretty much the same platforms as just about every other car in the General Motors range. They just looked different. So Pontiac was kind of left out with no real performance car. Also in 2002, Bob Lutz had gone to Australia for a business meeting with GM subsidiary in Australia, a company called Holden. And he was given this car to drive called the Monaro. It's a big two-door coupe with a Corvette engine, Corvette transmission, two-door, weighty car, very similar to like a Jaguar XK or an Aston Martin or something along those lines. And he loved it so much, he said, okay, that's it. We have to sell this car in America. It took only about a year and a half to get everything done because ironically this car was already being sold around the world. It had actually been in production since 2001. And it was already sold in Saudi Arabia and South Africa as a Chevrolet Lumina SS. So actually it was already made in left-hand drive, so very little development had to go into making this car. They basically just had to change some cosmetics to appeal a bit more to the American market, put some Pontiac badges on it, change the engine very slightly to meet US emissions, and that was it. And in 2004 this car debuted in America with the Corvette LS1 engine, 350 horsepower, and you had your choice of a 4-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual, the same transmissions that you got in a Corvette. It wasn't a very warm reception. People thought it was a bit too dull, too bland. It didn't really have much of a standout personality. The originals in 2004 had a flat hood that did not have hood scoops. They had a single exhaust on the driver's side. They were only offered with 17-inch wheels. Although you could get a sport appearance package that gave you a nicer hood, it was really only until the very end of the run of 2004. The reception was so cold in that first year, they made some changes, and in 2005 they also changed the engine. Because the new Corvette was out and was no longer using the LS1, they needed to change engines and upgrade to the LS2. 400 horsepower as opposed to 350, same transmissions as before. They did upgrade the suspension a little bit, they upgraded the brakes, they now offered 18-inch wheels, and they all got these hoods with the scoops. They got the dual exhaust setup in the back, true dual exhaust all the way back, and they also were offered, again, with the sport appearance package. This car is actually the predecessor to the current G8. In Australia, as Holden, this car was also built in a 4-door variant that was known as the Commodore, and the G8 is essentially the next generation of the current Commodore. Holden decided not to build a 2-door version of the newer generation, so there is no 2-door car anymore, so there are no longer any Monaros, or what we call the GTO. Now there's only Commodores, and we got the G8 for obviously a year and a half, and now Pontiac is gone, we don't have that anymore. If you're a fan of Top Gear, you'll probably see on a couple of different episodes them testing their version of the Monaro. It has different body styling, obviously, and different wheels, but it is essentially the same car. Their LS1 was a little bit more powerful, the same as the Australians, for emissions reasons, I imagine. But in the last generations, they also got the LS2. And as I said, this one is a 2006, so it does have the LS2. It has a little bit more than 400 horsepower. I've made a couple of modifications. It's probably more around 440, somewhere around those lines. But it is a fantastic car. And if you are interested in a good, reliable performance car. You really don't have a lot of choices these days. I mean, you obviously have Mustangs. If you're a Ford guy, you like Mustangs. And then there's Corvettes, but Corvettes are still very expensive, even used ones. A current generation Corvette used right now, you'd basically be looking to get in the door around maybe $25,000. Whereas if we use one of these, you can get right now for about $15,000 to $20,000. And if you're interested in lots of power, a very comfortable ride, being able to just go long distances without having to be tired or anything, and a little bit of handling, this is the car for you by all means. It's basically what a Jaguar XK8 would be or an Aston Martin, but for a fraction of the price. This one does have the factory 18-inch wheels on it. I like these very much. I think they look way better than the 17s. It got Corvette brakes in 2005 and 6. Not the biggest ones, not like off of the Z06 or anything, just the standard brakes. But they get the job done. They work very nice. It's also got a wonderful stereo inside, although you can tell it is Australian in nature because the on and off switch is on the passenger side of the radio. Oh, and the handbrake is too. Is another way you can tell this car was originally built for a right-hand drive country. But that's okay. It's really not that difficult, and it's a lot of fun. The only difference between this and say an 05, which had the same engine, is minor little interior touches like a door lock button or steering wheel controls that light up or different taillights, but that's really the only difference. They actually built this car for an additional 6 months after they quit making it in Australia just for the American market. They actually stopped production of this car at the end of 2005, and then through June 2006, they continued to make just the GTO for us, and then the line was shut down altogether. And then that was the end of it. But it is a fantastic car. I had a great time in it. With this LS2 engine, you can get to 60 miles an hour in under 5 seconds. Quarter miles, right around 13 flat, a little bit of work, you're easily into the 12s. And it's really not that bad at handling a car. I mean, it is a bit weighty. I think factory they're about 3,725 pounds. This one's a little less, but it's still probably very high 3,600s. But with a couple of little upgrades to suspension and springs and things like that, they can be a very competent handling car and ride very nicely. And it still gets good mileage. I mean, you put it in 6th gear and you set the cruise and you're getting 24, 25 miles to the gallon. I know it doesn't sound like a lot in a world of Priuses and little compacts, but when you've got a 400 plus horsepower V8 under the hood, that's actually not doing too bad. One of the other great things about this car is if you didn't have much of a decision-making process, it really was the car for you. There were very few options. I mean, basically you had a choice of color, transmission, and you could have a sunroof, but that was an extremely rare option. Not a lot of guys went for that because obviously it compromised your headroom and all of that. What you saw is what you got. They always had an LS2 or LS1 depending on the year, and they always got the fabulous interior and radio and all the accoutrements. It really is a well put together car. It's very comfortable, as I said. It's very nice inside. It's not like so many GM cars were American cars that are all plasticky and have heavy body panels. If you've ever owned a Chevy Silverado or even a Cadillac Escalade, you go and you look at the dashboard, you can just hit it. It's just one solid piece of hard plastic. Not this. This is very refined. It's got leather, very nice plastics. It all matches. It all fits perfectly. It's really a well-built car. Oh, and in case you're wondering what upgrades I've made to mine, well, they're pretty basic. It's got long tube headers on it, a MagnaFlow exhaust system, an AEM cold air intake, and a little bit of tuning with the help of a good friend of mine. And that's about it. I'm still getting very much used to the car. I'm still pretty green to it. Like I said, I've only had it since March, but it is a joy to get in and just go for a drive. It's nice and quiet on the highways, but then when you want to hear it, you can just go down a couple of gears and away you go. I've gotten a lot of waves and a lot of compliments. There aren't too many GTOs where I live, so it's not a very common car to see. But I kind of like that. I kind of like having a car where people turn their heads and go, hey, what's that? And then they ask you, and then you just let them know everything about it. And I love to do that. I love to let people know about cars. That's kind of why I decided to do this. But I think we've gotten to the point now where we should get out, take it out for a spin, show you what it sounds like, show you how it goes.